Hi, I'm Lawrence Grayson and you're watching PC World's Back to Basics. We've already looked at a wide range of components and how they can improve your PC's performance, but there's a point in every computer's life when the option for upgrading becomes limited by the age of your motherboard. Take PCI Express. Most commonly found on new graphics cards, this new standard uses different technology and a new slot configuration to previous models, so it's definitely not backwards compatible with older motherboards. The only way you can install a PCI Express graphics card in your system is by fitting a motherboard that supports it first, and the same is true of many new technologies. Upgrading your motherboard isn't just about support for new components though. Depending on the model you choose, you may also get high-definition audio, faster USB and FireWire, high-speed networking, smart overclocking, monitoring, and a whole host of other features. But it's also a tricky upgrade, so think very carefully before proceeding. The important thing here is to make sure you choose a motherboard that doesn't just support the new components you want to fit, but which also supports the older components that you want to keep. For example, you may be upgrading your motherboard to fit a new processor. But if your new board doesn't support your old RAM, or even your graphics card, the upgrade may prove to be more costly than you'd first intended. So do a bit of research before you buy. There are two schools of thought when it comes to upgrading your motherboard. The first believes that this is the perfect time to format your hard drive and reinstall everything from scratch, while the other thinks this sounds far too much like hard work and would rather leave it to Windows XP to sort things out. Either way, make a backup of the files and documents that you want to keep safe, and make sure you have all of your software and driver CDs to hand, just in case things don't go quite as planned. The best way to make a backup is with an external drive, like this iAmega Rev drive, but burning your important files direct to CD or DVD is another option. Now that your data is safe, you can dismantle your system. Start, as always, by touching a grounded metal surface to discharge any static, and then unplug the cables from the back of your PC. Move the case to a position where you have easy access to the interior and open it up. Start by disconnecting the power cables from the motherboard. These are clipped on, so press down on the clip to release them before pulling the cable free. Now remove the data cables that run from your motherboard to components like your hard disk or optical drives. If you're confident that you can reattach them correctly, remove them from the PC entirely so that they don't get in the way later. If you'd rather play things safe, leave them attached to the component end or label each one with some tape and a pen. With the cables now out of the way, you can remove any expansion cards, like your graphics, network or sound card. You'll find these in the slots at the far end of the motherboard, and they're usually released by unscrewing the retaining screw and just pulling them out of the slot. Take care with your graphics card, as it'll probably have a retaining clip like this one. If you're not sure how to release it, check with your old motherboard manual first. Next on the list is your PC's memory, and you'll find this in slots near the processor, just like the ones shown here. As I've shown you before, sticks of RAM are released by pressing down on the clips at either side of the slot until it pops out. So do this until all your slots are empty. Finally, it's time to remove the processor and its heatsink, unless of course you intend to ditch this along with your old motherboard. Heatsink designs vary, as does the way they connect to the motherboard. In this case, you need to slide a narrow, flathead screwdriver down the frame to release the catches, but once again, check your documentation if you're unsure. If this doesn't come away easily, it's because there's a layer of thermal paste between the heatsink and the chip that's making things a little sticky. Pull on the heatsink carefully. If necessary, gently twist it to help break the adhesion between the chip and the thermal paste. When the heatsink comes away, the processor should be left behind in its socket, like this. Now look carefully at the side of the socket. You'll see a small lever tucked beneath the catch. This holds the chip in place, so lift this out and upwards and you'll find the processor comes out easily. Put it somewhere safe and dust-free for now. At this point, the only thing that's keeping your motherboard attached to your PC are the mounting screws. So take a Phillips screwdriver to these. Usually there are around 8 to remove, so make sure you get them all before pulling at the motherboard. With the screws removed, the motherboard will come away from the PC easily, but you'll need to tilt it slightly to free it up at the back where the ports stick out. Now it's time to fit your new board, and I've chosen Gigabyte's GA8i 945P-G. As well as having a really snappy name, it uses Intel's 945P Express chipset and is crammed with the latest technology. Ultra-fast DDR2 RAM, PCI Express graphics, Serial 80A2, RAID, FireWire 800, Gigabit Ethernet, onboard high-definition audio, not to mention support for the latest Intel Pentium processors, a dual BIOS failsafe, and passive cooling. However, this does mean that some of my old components need updating, so I'm taking this opportunity to fit a new PCI Express graphics card, some DDR2 RAM, and a brand new Intel processor. To keep things simple, I'm keeping my old hard drive for now. I can always fit a new Serial 80A drive later, but I'm ditching my old sound card in favour of the motherboard's integrated audio. If you're keeping your old sound card, remember to disable the motherboard's audio chipset in the BIOS, just like I showed you in the video on sound cards. It's a good idea to fit some of these components before the motherboard goes into the case, especially your RAM and the processor. I'll be covering CPU upgrades in a separate video, so I'll just deal with the basics for now. Line the chip up with the socket, drop it into place and close the lever. Add a little thermal paste and then attach the heatsink. Standard models like this Intel heatsink clip onto these 4 points on the motherboard. Some newer designs like this high-performance Gigabyte G power unit need you to attach a mounting plate first, which requires access to the underside of the motherboard. You may also find that the old blanking plate at the back of your PC no longer matches the port configuration of your new board, so just push the old one out of its recess and clip the new one into its place. Another thing to do before fitting the motherboard is connect the LED and switch cables, as this can be a fiddly task at the best of times. Use the labelling on the cables to identify them and look closely at the motherboard to see where they plug into. The motherboard manual will have a clear diagram if you need further clarification. Now you're ready to fit the motherboard to the case. Make sure it's the right way around, with the ports at the rear of the PC, and lower it into position. Lead in with the back edge of the board so that the ports line up with the new blanking plate, then lower it carefully onto the risers. When you've lined it up, screw it into place. But don't be overzealous here, as over-tightening these screws can damage your motherboard. Now that it's installed, you can add your remaining components, in my case a new graphics card. Then reconnect components like your hard drive, floppy drive, and optical drive. As I'm keeping my old hard drive, and this motherboard only has the one IDE channel, I'm hooking up my optical drive and my hard drive to the same cable. Before I plug it in, I need to check that the jumper on my hard drive is set to master and that my optical drive is set to slave, just like I've shown you in previous videos. I can then connect both drives to the IDE cable and then plug it into the IDE channel on the motherboard, like this. Finally, reconnect all the power cables to your motherboard and components, taking care not to overlook system fans or other cables like this 12-volt ATX power line. As always, take a moment to tidy up your cabling. Your PC will run cooler and quieter as a result. When you're done, check that all the cables are properly seated, then put the case back on and reconnect your keyboard, mouse and monitor. If you're keeping your old setup, just switch on your PC and follow the on-screen instructions as it reboots. You'll find that Windows XP will take a while to sort out all of this new hardware that you've installed, which is why it's important to make sure you've got all the driver CDs to hand. Start off by running the installation CD that came with the motherboard, then move on to components like your graphics card, modem and networking hardware. With a bit of installation and plenty of reboots, your system will soon be up and running again. If you're going for the clean install instead, you'll need to set the system to boot from your Windows XP CD first. Hit the BIOS setup key as the system powers up, and this is either F2 or delete, and look for the boot order menu. Select your optical drive as the first boot device, then save your changes and exit. When your system reboots, it'll read from the Windows XP disk in your optical drive, and you can then format your disk and start the Windows setup from scratch. Bear in mind that this procedure will wipe all of the data from your hard drive, including your applications and operating system. So don't do this unless you definitely have the disk for all your original software to hand. Either way, it's highly likely that your copy of Windows XP will need to be reactivated, and the only way to do this is to call Microsoft for a new code. The telephone number to call will appear on screen if you need it. Once that's out of the way, your system upgrade will be finished. So that's it, you're done. With a new motherboard in your system, your computer will be better equipped to deal with new technology, bringing you faster system performance and more features than before. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on PC World's Back to Basics.